The world today is not equal. The United Nations 2030 sustainability goals envisions a sustainable and equitable world where everyone has access to basic needs, healthcare, education, and more, and the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. The entire pandemic scenario that has been created due to the COVID-19 outbreak is not new actually in this world. We have been there before, be it the Spanish flu, the Black Death, the two world wars, and we have bounced back. Whether it was 911 or 2611, closer to home in India, human resilience has always found a way to live with new, albeit cautious realities. Here's one arc of our current realities. Look out your window, and bluer skies will look back at you. The air is cleaner. A new study in Natural Climate Change Journal has found that compared to 2019, global carbon emissions fell 17% between January and April of this year due to the widespread lockdown. So it takes us closer to achieving climate action, life on land. Climate action is SDG 13, life on land SDG 15, and two of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which look to address by 2030 a set of global challenges that we face. While the novel coronavirus has infected 55 lakh globally, or more than that now, as we speak, and close to 2 lakh people in India, and killed over 3.5 lakhs, one of its unmissable, perhaps unintended too, gains, mind you, has been the drop in pollution levels. India too witnessed its carbon emissions fall for the first time in 4 decades. But as far as silver linings go, that's about it. Beyond the obvious public health crisis, COVID-19 has laid bare a number of invisible fault lines that threaten our social fabric. The lack of healthcare, public and welfare distribution systems, or the vulnerability of the underprivileged, all can be linked to SDG number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Those in the vulnerable categories, like your domestic help, find themselves without basic necessities such as money, which is SDG number 1, no poverty, food, SDG number 2, no hunger, soap and clean water, that is SDG number 6, clean water and sanitation. The crisis has affected their children's education, SDG 4, quality education, and their ability to keep a roof over their head, which is SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and SDG 10, that is connected to reduced inequalities. As blue-collar staff are laid off by the thousands in the midst of widespread business shutdowns, and as workers migrate back home, or even now they are returning back to work, a health crisis has quickly turned into an economic and social meltdown. The absence of social safety nets has only aggravated the crisis, setting us back on social development parameters that were always present even much before the SDGs were formed. And that is exactly what Satya Tripathi, the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, talks about, that this entire pandemic has exposed and reminded us that people at the lower end of the economic pyramid suffer much more in an extremely disproportionate manner. A recent Oxfam report also says that 500 million people will fall back into poverty as a result of coronavirus induced hardships. 500 million people, I repeat, will fall back into poverty as a result of coronavirus induced hardships. Now, historically, countries have spent on public infrastructure to boost investments and create jobs to recover from economic dips. The entire world is supposed to spend, if you check reports, around 40 to 70 trillion dollars to construct roads, bridges, ports. Now, if the understanding of sustainability is not a part of that plan today, you are looking at a bigger problem and accelerating the climate challenge. So we require policy planners to look at the true cost of investments and actually understand that by putting in the cost, what exactly are we willing to let go for it? So students in this session who could be connected to climate action, environment, public policy should understand these sensibilities to a great extent. Because if climate change is not tackled across a multi-sectoral format of approach, we are going to face a lot of issues that will recur throughout the year and for years to come. The European Union, for example, is planning to weave climate action into its green economic stimulus for the private sector. It will also include biodiversity, conservation in its recovery plan, noting that COVID-19 has shown how vulnerable its loss makes us. India, if you see this slide, on the other hand, opened up coal mining to the private sector. And of course, it's a mistake because solar power is cheaper everywhere except in India. India has the world's fifth largest, close to 9% coal reserves, almost like accounting for over 101 billion tons. Domestic production by private companies will help reduce imports. India was the world's second largest coal importer in 2018. But more than that, it's important to note that we were also the largest contributor to transport and logistics emission. And of course, the center or the central government cannot let the coal sector die because it contributes to millions of jobs. It's estimated that until 2050, coal will be here to stay around the world. At the same time, renewable energy needs to be ramped up to reduce the dependency on coal. Till the world comes up with solutions for climate engineering, we will have to ensure we replace as many gigawatts of fossil fuel with clean energy. Investor interest, the people who are investing in renewable energy, actually can be gauged by the very recent, I think around 2019, 2018, the state-run NHPC auctioned a 2 gigawatt of solar project at tariffs lower than the 2019 average. And despite COVID-19 uncertainties, which you can see right now in the Bloomberg NEEF report in this slide, there you go. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has been continuously auctioning renewable projects. Strong track record and policy clarity seem to have driven investors to take the risk, even when the world is grappling with the COVID-19 outbreak. So the government of India is also advancing many tenders that were in the pipeline to signal that India is not stopping on renewables. That's a very important understanding that we have to interpret in terms of the upcoming sectors that have the entire focus on climate action. So a lot of you in this session who might be wondering that, well, I have not wanting to pursue climate change, but it is important for all of us to understand the new sectoral openings and opportunities. With a lot of jobs that are being lost across companies and across different positions, there can be a possible reinstatement into sectors connected to, say, a climate action that might require more human resources, even when there is global recession. So that is where the knowledge of climate action is extremely critical to all of us and for all of us. If social cost and climate change fail to drive home the urgency, then of course, you know, we will be facing a lot of issues, because in India, as we have noticed, that coronavirus is not the only problem. Eastern India was devastated by Cyclone Amphan, especially Orissa, West Bengal, parts of Bangladesh maybe. While North India has been under the scourge of the heat wave, the West is swarming with locusts, including Rajasthan. So at a time like this, returning to businesses as usual without building better businesses will reinforce the status quo. And of course, it's a free lunch, for companies and organizations to create private profits at the cost of public losses. It's a very critical aspect that social science aspirants have to realize. You cannot let organizations create private profits at the cost of public losses. And that was the exact situation that was created during the last financial crisis of 2008. And of course, if social cost and the climate change fail to drive home the urgency, frequent zoonotic diseases where the pathogen jumps from animals to humans, in the last 20 years, be it SARS, Ebola, Zika, MERS, swine flu, and now COVID-19, are a direct result of our actions, including removing the forest frontier between animals and humans. And of course, we are reaping the horrific results. The World Economic Forum, for example, recently remarked that frequent epidemics are coinciding with globalization, urbanization, and climate change. As coronavirus spreads, so does the sobering reality that epidemics will become more common with our increasingly connected age. Which basically means that you cannot go on doing what you used to do before the outbreak. And this is the perfect time to reset and create an equitable and sustainable world that is resilient enough to face such challenges in future. The economic fallout of COVID-19, of course, is quite important for us to understand. The International Monetary Fund's chief economist Geeta Gopinath estimated a global GDP loss of $9 trillion, the worst since the Great Depression. And in a blog, she actually wrote that this is a crisis much more graver than the financial crisis of 2008. And definitely everyone, including all of us, including the students, including education institutions, including companies, governments, are looking for a very definitive blueprint to recover from the economic toll. If you look at this slide, you'll realize that India features in a ranking of 115 out of the 163 SDG members, in which India has been lagging behind in almost all the goals accepting actually climate action and poverty. And of course, the pandemic is expected to set the country back even further. But that does not need to be the case if all of us want that to be reversed. If we weave the principles of SDGs into our COVID-19 recovery plans, you can help both the economy and the planet recover. A lot of precious tax dollars are going to be recycled and wasted into the economy as people don't understand the importance of investing in the new economic model, which obviously has much more resilience and less likelihood to fail in the way we are seeing it currently. And of course, the question is never about how organizations, government will become more profitable just going green and promoting a green economy. It is also about how all of us will connect to our end consumer or our end beneficiary at a deeper level by doing the right thing. As COVID-19 also triggers reverse migration to villages, that's where the jobs have to be created in the days to come. The stimulus that comes for the economy has to be at the village economy level. India needs to stop copying China of becoming an export-led economy. It's a complete wasted philosophy, and we will only destroy good capital and ruin the economy. According to the 2015-16 agriculture census, there are, as you can see, 14.5 crore farmer families in India. For them, natural farming can create millions of jobs and better incomes. For instance, by September 2018, 3.54 lakh farmers in more than 1,000 villages in Andhra Pradesh adopted zero-budget natural farming as an alternative to fertilizer-based farming. A very recent study also showed the practice benefited 10 out of the 17 SDGs. As you can see in the table, it benefited 10 out of 17 SDGs. The most significant impact has been a better yield and income. By 2024, Andhra Pradesh wants its 6 million farmers to adopt the project, and by 2026, cover 8 million hectares of cultivable land. So that is very crucial for us to factor in. And the impact of business on society is never only financial. It is about measuring corporate performance by evaluating human capital. Human capital would be knowledge, skills, jobs. Natural capital, that would include natural resources, environment, and climate. Social capital, which is focused a lot nowadays on minimizing inequality. And of course, financial capital. It cannot be an option to have a social and natural cost and not declare them. So companies have to be more accountable. We have to be more accountable about any social or natural cost that we might be incurring. And of course, governments of countries, leaders of nations, they have to lead the way. Social science aspirants, people in the policy level, people in the grassroots level also have to lead the way. It is high time that we try to minimize income tax and increase tax on mining, because that will lead to procurement of sustainable buildings, vehicles, energy, and it will also steer the private sector to the new economy. And sustainability is very good business. If you take the example of Ambuja Cement, and you can check them online, which despite being a water intensive business, has been water positive for 6 or 7 years, giving back more than it consumes in the areas where its plants operate. Ambuja Cement says it accounts for the support of local villages for its operations, lowering the risks of unrest from local communities. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it reached out to provide health kits, almost 2 lakh masks, spread awareness, and food security, which basically included ration kits for 60,000 families and touching 6 lakh people living near their plants. So you have to make people understand the importance of investing in new economic models that are, of course, way more resilient. And you have to adopt a triple bottom line accounting model, which basically takes in the three P's. Remember the three P's. The three P's are people, planet, profit. People, planet, and profit. And people, planet, and profit will help all of us to evaluate the financial, environmental, and the social health. Every year, we have to assess our negative and positive social and environmental values. And that is exactly where so many organizations now, including policy think tanks, work towards social impact assessment. They call it SIA or EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment of businesses. And they recruit a lot of social science aspirants from different backgrounds into their domains. A lot of consulting firms are working in the fields of social impact assessment because that helps us to understand the positive or negative social and environmental value, and also our financial performance, also our human performance, which is very important. As you can see in this slide, it's very evident that in the weeks and months ahead, India is already suffering and will suffer more massive mental health crisis due to unemployment, alcohol abuse, economic hardship, domestic violence, and indebtedness. This is a chart at a corporate level, so you can imagine the levels of uncertainty and the vulnerability in the marginalized communities. So, almost 150 million people with pre existing mental health issues, be it COVID-19 survivors, frontline medical workers, young people, differently abled people, women workers in the unorganized sector, and the elderly, are at great risk. We believe that India's already overburdened mental health machinery will be unable to handle this unfolding situation and will need to leverage the power of communities with locally devised evidence-based solutions propelled by people wanting to pursue careers in mental health, careers in counseling, psychologists, companies who want to invest in mental health, CSR investments in mental health, governments who are pro mental health, and create the different templates, which could be destigmatization, which is again very important, that the entire social distancing narrative has to be rebuilt. It's actually encouraging to see that how some early COVID-19 survivors, they have actually turned to social media to share their experiences in order to build confidence amongst others. Maybe there is an opportunity to train more than almost like 20,000 Indians who have now recovered and to turn them into COVID-19 champions, equipping them to serve as buddies for people who are now feared to be positive or are under suspicion. These champions who have already experienced the stress firsthand and having recovered are the right people to lead this change. The second important factor would be community infrastructure for support. Mental health systems always have been extremely scanty in India. And during this time, the gap between what is needed and what is available has widened markedly. The real need is to build community based capacity in order to handle local issues long after the acute phase of the epidemic or the pandemic. This will require a close partnership between civil society, local administration, and a standardized training and technology backbone if it is to deliver consistent quality support. Local anchors will build accountability and ownership and contextualize it for the surroundings. The other important aspect is building resilience amongst adolescents and young children. For adolescents, this is the reset time. It is the time to build mental well being and resilience into schools, the community, and their families. We need a systemic approach to build the demand of mental well being. Like, we had broadly introduced sports into schools in the late 1990s. So these are very critical issues that we need to highlight when it comes to definitely the importance of mental health professionals and the rising demand for them. And there is no speck of doubt that COVID-19 is also amplifying the gender inequality in India. Women, of course, are bearing a disproportionate amount of the burden that the imposition of lockdowns, shrinking of economic opportunity has created. Even in normal times, if you can see, women face extra burdens when infrastructure is inadequate. Say, for example, around 4.5 lakh million people in Mumbai lack access to a household water connection, and they have to be compelled to line up at community water taps. And the people who line up to fetch water are, of course, women. Under India's COVID-19 lockdown, household water needs have swelled because temperatures are rising all across the country. All family members are at home. Migrant workers have come back. A lot of women's husbands are back home. And the emphasis on frequent hand washing has led and pushed women more to queue up for water. Some of them are even turning to an underground water market, which operates at the cloak of darkness, leading to black marketing, and often they face sexual or verbal harassments. And there is, as we all know, a huge surge in the amount of domestic violence, sexual abuse complaints that have risen during the COVID-19 pandemic. The surge of violence is affecting millions of women across all classes. And some of the non-profit organizations and grassroots level social organizations are actually finding creative tactics to support women. Like, say, for example, hiding phone numbers for domestic abuse hotlines inside food rations. They are just slipping in a little chit into food rations. These are very laudable efforts, but there are greater challenges. And of course, the United Nations themselves have warned that the pandemic could reduce progress against gender-based violence by almost one third. COVID-19 is also shifting the other aspects of household dynamics, like domestic responsibilities that women bear, like cooking and cleaning. If you look around in your own households also, have ballooned. Even worse, because women in Indian families, they tend to eat last and the least. Research has actually established that financial strain and food shortages affect women's nutrition more than men's. The same pattern has been visible across all developing world countries, including Zimbabwe or Bangladesh. To make matters even worse, the lockdown has cut off most formal and informal support systems for women. In developing countries, low income families often share one smartphone owned by the husband, and women's lack of digital access is making them more vulnerable to misinformation. So, unequal access to technology will fuel a lot of consequences for women, especially in education and employment. Sorry. And of course, as many of the world's children switch to online learning, girls in countries like India may lose out, given that they are less likely than boys to have access to the internet. In fact, many aspects of the COVID-19 economic fallout are likely to reduce job prospects for women. Right now, since the 1st of June, as we are trying to ease its lockdown with requirements that businesses operate with fewer employees, trends toward mechanization could accelerate. So automation will be brought in more. Because women are generally relegated to menial tasks within production processes, their jobs are often the most at risk when companies decide to automate. And with the partial lockdowns involving reduced public transit, local trains are still not operating. Women might find their access to work curtailed even more, given that their disproportionate reliance on buses and trains for commuting. India's female labor participation force is at par with Saudi Arabia, around 20%. And if women's employment continues to drop post COVID, this will only magnify the damage to their position in families and society, given that employment is one of the strongest predictors of women's empowerment, not to mention the importance of their contribution to the GDP. So it's important to understand what can be a gender sensitive pandemic response. You can check up a lot of journals on EPW or Oxfam, and everywhere it begins with a full throttled focus on supporting women who face domestic violence. In a recent court ruling, if you have followed the news in Delhi, it provides a roadmap of addressing domestic violence faced by women, especially during these times. It's about communicating and publicizing helplines all across. Put stickers all around the city or the village about the helpline so that women, it can catch the attention of the women. Relaxing lockdown rules for women to leave home and seek support. And of course, very crucially, sensitizing the police. And women's employment must become a priority in recovery efforts. You can actually do a little study of across all the economic stimulus package, how many of those packages have focused on women in terms of recovery. You will get the answer on your own. If you go to the PIB, Press Information Bureau site, and download the presentations that Nirmala Sitharaman had shared, and check how many of the policies have been gender sensitive, you will get the answer. You have to enhance more digital access and skills that need to be scaled up, especially targeting low income women. Direct employment programs, also you have to create an opportunity to be given to women. Supplies should be expanded. For example, government in Andhra Pradesh, if you check the news, is employing thousands of women to stitch masks. And this has to be like a mainstream occupational requirement in India, focusing on women. So the policy around women have to be restructured around rebuilding economies and societies in ways that would empower women to lead a safe, productive, and fulfilling life. So, as you can see in the slide, one talks about the familiarity with a transgender person across a lot of countries, and of course, the ways of measuring inclusion of LGBTI people. So, with the entire world crippled by the coronavirus, our focus right now is on resolving the pandemic. But our recovery will not be effective or complete if we forget our most vulnerable communities. We spoke about one vulnerable community or gender, rather, in women. The other, of course, are the LGBTI. It is very clear, and I'm sure a lot of you would definitely agree, that the crisis will impact LGBTI, LGBTQ people immensely. They are more likely to have a pre existing medical condition, which means that they are more likely to get sick and take a longer time to recover. They are more likely to work in the service industry, for instance, in restaurant and retail, which means they are more likely to become unemployed during the crisis. And of course, the list of issues for LGBTQ people will go on and on. The good news is that the crisis comes at a time when the transgender community has been increasingly seeing support, and they have been seeking basic human rights support. And even the World Economic Forum's meeting in Davos with the young global leader, they spoke about LGBTQ inclusion into all aspects of technology and sector. In when we reimagine workforce of the future, it's very important that we step up anti-LGBTQ bills, step up to oppose the bills, and introduce them in state legislatures too. The majority of these bills have focused discriminating against transgender youth. Most egregiously, some of the bills would prevent someone's child from receiving gender affirming medical care. And that is again one aspect that we have to keep in mind while addressing the issues impacted by the pandemic. If you check, you will find that a state like Manipur in Imphal, they created a dedicated COVID-19 quarantine center only for transgenders. So a lot of you, again, in this session today, or who's watching me speak and present, interested in working with the LGBTQ or LGBTI community, should realize the importance of including them in the mainstream, championing for CSR investments, championing for bringing them to mainstream economic activities and quality learning opportunities would be very crucial. But the bottom line remains that whatever we want to do and achieve, the way we want to design our career, it's critical that the entire economy of our country has a very robust system of education and health. COVID-19 has reaffirmed the fact that health is definitely wealth. We have realized that if we don't invest in universal coverage and create a robust public health system, we end up paying a very heavy price. Thousands of lives lost, millions of dollars lost in economic productivity. Like the rest of the world, Indians are for the first time so singularly focused on healthcare and public health. And everyone suddenly wants to fix healthcare. But the point is, can this COVID-19 driven attention translate into longer term gains for the health system in India? It should not be such that once we achieve 21 days without any new cases, we forget about health. So, for decades, successive Indian governments have neglected public health and healthcare. It's almost like a broken record that no one really listens to what we once cite against India's miserly 1.5 to 2% GDP expenditure on health. Even the bare minimum recommended health expenditure of 2.5% of GDP has not been realized. This is a recommendation by WHO, which we have not been able to fulfill after over 70 years of independence. A big lesson for India, the US, and also many other countries is that no country can strengthen its health system during a lockdown. Being prepared means having a robust healthcare system with universal health coverage, including primary, secondary, and tertiary cares. If I take you back to the Sustainable Development Goals that all countries have pledged to deliver right at the start of our presentation, universal health coverage is what they have pledged by 2030. And that definitely includes India. But sadly, nearly 50% of the world's population lacks essential health services. India's rank is also very poor on progress when it comes to health-related SDGs. For example, the prevalence of underweight children in India, underweight, mind you, is amongst the highest in the world. Underweight children, I repeat, in India is amongst the highest in the world. Tuberculosis kills nearly 500,000 Indians each year, with India leading the world in TB burden. India has more people living in rural areas without access to clean water than any other country. So these facts definitely reinforce that India has failed to invest in health for decades. And we need to definitely think beyond single disease initiative. It's not just COVID-19 or the pandemic that is the only issue that we are dealing with. We have to focus a lot on increasing the recognition to combine vertical programs of disease-based models that we are doing right now with horizontal health system of strengthening. Many government in our country, or including government hospitals, have a mismatch in bed capacity and patient load. Multiple patients on one bed are a common sight in many Indian hospitals. I'm sure you have seen this. Now, they cannot do that due to the social distancing norms. For many maternity units in public hospitals, this actually can mean that they can only accommodate perhaps half the number of clients than before. And there has been very little talk of ramping up the number of beds and facilities for maternity and other non-COVID conditions. Many people with non-COVID conditions are struggling because they do not know where to go for care. Cancer patients, dialysis, tuberculosis, pregnancy care, etc. Even the blood banks are running dry. social media is flooded with urgent requests for blood donations. We should use COVID-19 as an impetus to improve the quality of the overall healthcare. You have to create a more compassionate and equitable system. Also remember, though we have been talking a lot about digital health, speaking about telemedicine, as you can see, mobile phone and apps being created to help people reach out to doctors, digital technologies can still not replace or replicate a functional, robust public healthcare system. An Arogya Setu app cannot magically test COVID-19 and provide medical care to those who have a severe respiratory disease. The need of the hour is multidisciplinary conversations. Health is multidisciplinary. Remember, if you're a social worker, you have to talk health. You are a climate scientist, you have to talk health. You are a public policy professional, you have to talk health. You are a chief financial officer, you have to talk health. You are working for women, you have to talk health. You're focusing on environment, you got to talk health. You're focusing on electricity regulation, you have to talk health. That is how, from a 360-degree dimension, newer solutions which are grounded in reality, aspiring to further equity and quality of care, will be created. We have to channelize this very important and unprecedented attention on healthcare and direct the energy towards developing a stronger, sustainable, and reliable health system for India. So these are the 4 scenarios of the post-COVID world of work. I don't want to highlight these scenarios more elaborately. You can check that because it has all the important points and the possibilities. But what I want to highlight is, throughout our discussion today, what is very crucial for us to understand is the fact that the requirement of human service professionals is supreme in this time and age. Because when you look into the macro environment crisis, if you are amongst the community who believes that the international order and the global order is going to change profoundly, you could be fever dreaming that about a post-capitalist, climate-friendly new world order with universal basic income. You have to understand that this calls for professionals who will be working in the social sector. Social sectors will be boosted. Social sector skills will be more widely applicable than ever before. Be it problem solving, the entire sensibility that how the tens of millions have slid back into poverty and to solve it. The entire understanding of the thousands who are facing increasing domestic violence, or finding out that the government program they relied on are now broke. You have to realize that the budget allocation which happened at the start of the year is no more valid. So you cannot go to an interview or applying for a social science course and want to talk about a scheme or a project of the government that is no more under the attention. So that is where you should be realizing that social sector requires that perspective building tremendously. I keep on emphasizing on the fact that when it comes to the social development sector, it is one of those domains that is usually much more open to replicating effective solutions without obsessing about creating a monopoly or claiming market. You want to be equitable, right? Once you have innovated a solution, you want them to be replicable, so that if you have replicated something sitting in a district of Maharashtra, somewhere in Assam, that same model can be replicated. That is the big advantage of social sector when it comes to recovering economies. The other very important aspect is when you see, as you realized through the slide, that most social problems are interconnected. That's why so many nonprofits that begin by running a low income school, they end up working on healthcare and livelihoods and gender. Our present crisis of coronavirus outbreak is actually an amalgamation of systems change problems across business and government, and at the most macro scale imaginable. The social sector will need to step up and show that we have been ahead of this game already. And of course, you are not alone and you can't work alone. You have to build partnerships. The private sector this way comes. Expect the private sector to play a much greater role in driving impact. The last two seismic global shocks were 9/11 and 2008 recession, and both led to an increased demand for careers in social impact, with a myriad of people questioning what they were doing with their lives. You can expect social businesses to rise from the ashes of failed nonprofits, and also expect traditional companies to play a very important role. It's very important that we position ourselves in order to create such templates. You have to talk about the newer skills. You have to understand how you're going to fill up the gap in the sector. For example, you might be wanting to learn, or you might have learned an online course on data visualization that will create better reports for demonstrating a social impact. You might want to leverage your networks for funding. So that is where, again, the skills are critical to be portrayed. And you have to use the downtime very wisely. A lot of questions have been raised throughout that we are not sure when educational institutions will resume sessions. A lot of us are at the brink of our careers in terms of moving ahead for newer courses, awaiting results of entrance exams, or awaiting interviews. But you have to use your downtime very, very wisely and innovatively. The suggestion is that read more on your subject, on your topic, and on interconnected issues. The other important thing is do more. Even when you cannot step out of your house, you can actually do a lot of research. You can actually start creating presentations like how I am doing. And you can start talking about it to your friends, families, to your connected networks. Go online. Publish it on LinkedIn, YouTube. Record a video. All of these skills go a long way in creating a very sustainable society that I hope I've been able to communicate truly requires human service professionals working towards a more equitable, economically sustainable, and just society to the fullest possible extent, like never before.